Hey, peace and blessings, everybody. It's your brother Asare back with yet another one. About to tap into another issue of that Ether Illustrated. So we're gonna hop into that. First, before we get into that, just gotta say peace to the ancestors. And as a matter of fact, we dedicate this particular issue of Ether Illustrated to the ancestors. You see what I'm saying? This, if y'all see the title of the video, this one is going to be over ancestral veneration. You see what I'm saying? We're still dealing with the bioetheric feedback loop, similar framework that we've been dealing with, or whatever case may be. In this one, we're going to deal with the concept of ancestor worship, not just in any particular culture, but just all over the planet. The various different modalities of it and the philosophies and thought process behind ancestral veneration. The purpose for it, because in other videos, we're going to go into like what we talk about bioetheric governance. When we talk about ancient civilizations being governed based on the fact that there is a bioetheric feedback loop, there is some feedback loop from the etheric blueprint of the collective populace um, um, to the actions and the thoughts and feelings and the hearts of the everyday man in a society and stuff like that. And the feedback from that would be, let's say, like the prosperity of that nation or wars, conflicts, civil wars, things of that nature, or whatever. That would be the feedback based on how the um, collective is feeling and functions and everything like that. So we talked about that. We're going to get into that a little bit more or whatever, how ancient civilizations operated off of this feedback loop. That's the purpose for sacrifices, divination, the priesthood kind of like modulating the energetic stability of the civilization through sacrifices and things of that nature. So we're going to get into that on another video. This video, we're going to go into ancestral worship. We talked a little, excuse me, ancestral veneration. We talked a little bit more about that on another video when we were talking about the Bardo states. We're going to kind of go into it from a different perspective. We were talking about, when we talked about the Bardos, we were talking about Tibetan Buddhism and everything like that, how you have the various Bardos and what happens when the body, how we termed it in this language, we termed it when the field decouples from its battery or capacitor, namely the body or whatever case may be. And we talked about there is, I think it's the Bardo or Dharmata, I forget exactly the name of it as far as Tibetan Buddhism is concerned. There's a decoupling that takes place, and then there's the etheric or the field that's been encapsulated in the body or whatever case may be, having access to the ether at large. And that's when you have these rushes of, the guardian angels and the various deities or entities that a person may see when they die or whatever case may be. It's different phases that they've categorized as far as ancient people have categorized specifically in Tibetan Buddhism and stuff like that. That's one categorization of it, but the different phases that a person goes on to when they die, all on into the second, what they call the second death, when they lose their memory and they become reincarnated in esoteric philosophy. So we're going to get into the whole thing about ancestral veneration. What is the connection to the ancestors that the living have? You see what I'm saying? What is the relevance of that connection? What happens when that connection is severed or what have you? We're going to kind of get into all that. We're still going to deal with the bioetheric feedback loop. We're dealing with that because that bridges this into science, scientific phenomena. We've already talked about how the body's electrical and everything like that. We took painstaking detail on that, going through Robert Becker's work, bridging this whole thing from the melanin in the human biofield. If you're not familiar with anything I've been talking about, more than likely it's probably a video on that subject. So we've been talking about all that subject matter, the ether, the bioetheric feedback loop, the electric soul, the whole nine. We've been talking about that whole thing or whatever catch may be. Now we're going to come back to ancestor worship and kind of understand the psychology of ancestor worship, why people do it, and what's significant about it. So let's see here. With no further ado, We're gonna just take it one time from the top. Yeah, I mean, oh yeah, and by the way, peace to the gods, man. If you've been watching this, who is the true and living? You must be the true and living. You know what I mean? I appreciate you for tuning in. Appreciate all the love. You know what I mean? So yeah, you know, your favorite underdog out here. You know what I mean? Thugging. So appreciate y'all checking me out. So with no further ado, okay, the continuum of consciousness, ancestral veneration, bioetheric fields, and the mechanics of post-mortem resonance. The mechanics of post-mortem resonance. So, like we've been doing, we devised a framework because if I just filter random questions through the AI, it's gonna give me some mainstream gobbledygook. So I have to tighten the parameters on the AI and structure it and come up with an algorithm within an algorithm to kind of filter this through so the AI kind of gives us what we need or whatever case may be. So now we can filter because from the beginning I've been telling you that the experiential in itself was an algorithm. You see what I'm saying? So we're kind of tweaked it. You see what I'm saying? And put it through the AI so we can kind of ask certain questions or whatever. So we're just gonna go for what we know here. Um, Foundational concepts in ancestral continuity, the universal imperative of ancestor veneration, a comparative overview. The ancestral worship or veneration constitutes a core aspect of traditional religion across a vast spectrum of global cultures and historical periods. Yes, it does, from ancient to modern. This practice fundamentally revolves around the ritual celebration and remembrance of deified ancestors who are generally regarded as integral components of this world. So just like how we would have in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, for example, I know we're gonna get into that a little bit. Egyptian Book of the Dead, you have basically it's really no such thing as that. It's really the book of the coming forth by day. The whole premise behind that is the deceased person would die, be judged, go through their whole journey through the underworld or whatever case may and be reborn so that they could participate in the world of the living once again. So that was in their civilization, meaning ancient Egyptian civilization, certain parts of it or what have you, in their whole mindset, they would go to the person's tomb or whatever, leave requests and things like that, notes and stuff like that on the person in the person's tomb and everything like that, or whatever case may be. They um, invoke them as a part of society and everything like that, the dead people and everything like that. So that's just and like we said, as far as ancient Egypt or whatever, or ancient Kemet, um, we already discussed how, based on um, the way that their philosophical and religious system was set up, they were aware of the feedback loop that we're talking about. They may not have called it that, but they were aware of that. There was a feedback loop. They dealt with omens and magic and certain rituals and things like that, and their priesthood kind of dealt with that concept. So these ancestors are perceived as godly beings who retain their individual identities and serve as vital conduits to the supreme power of heaven, embodying or reproducing the creative order of the cosmos. The enduring objective of such veneration is twofold: to ensure the continued well-being of the deceased in the afterlife, and critically to secure their position, disposition, and influence over the fortunes and misfortunes of the living descendants. So that ties into what we talked about previously on the bioetheric feedback loop, and the electric soul. We were theorizing from the perspective of the soul being electric. Like we said, that's a concept that Pascal Beverly Randolph kind of brought to the fore in his day and time. However, we're just kind of expanding upon it with Tesla's physics and everything like that. So um, with this would potentially tie into some of the acausal stuff that Jung is talking about, with the dead participating in the fortune and misfortune of their living descendants. Um, how we talked about the DNA being an etheric antenna and everything like that. So the DNA has something to do with the soul and everything like that. Um, how we talked about there is a blueprint for the individual on an etheric level, as well as there is a blueprint for the whole group, whatever group that may be, on the etheric level or whatever case may be. So that's kind of interesting. As some of the previous conversations that we kind of got into, like we said, um, um, the descendant has uh, basically ability to the deceased person has the ability to influence the fortune and misfortune of their living descendants. So that is interesting. So we've already discussed the significance or how DNA ties into this and how there's an individual blueprint, excuse me, and a collective blueprint. So let's keep going. The anthropological development of formalized ancestor cults suggests they represent a relatively later stage in the evolution of religious practice, subsequent to the emergence of animism. So shortly after the emergence of animism, everything has a spirit type thing, similar to what we talk about in the experiential. Everything is sentient and everything like that. Um, the sequence implies that the institutionalization of ancestor worship is inherently linked to the structural complexity of settled societies, particularly those organized around fixed lineage structures, property inheritance, and formalized jural authority across generations. So when you get into what it's saying, basically, when you start getting into ancestor worship, these are individuals who are thinking generationally, who have property and things of that to transfer, and they have a name that will carry on. I think in the actual book, True Master Volume 2, we talk about the person's name is a part of their essence, as it were. So let's keep moving. Rituals such as the King Ming and double ninth grave sweeping festival in China transformed the biological reality of death into an immutable social fact, stabilizing the lineage structure and cultivating essential kinship values like filial piety, family loyalty, and continuity. The protracted nature of these traditions, from Chinese patriarchal religion to African and Roman systems, highlight a profound need for sustaining a reciprocal energetic relationship between the living and the deceased. A reciprocal energetic relationship between the living and the deceased. So there's some sort of connection that the deceased relatives have off of the DNA. We can tell because they would be some part of the collective blueprint, or in their lifetime they would have been accessing the collective blueprint of that group or whatever case may be. So let's keep going. The necessity of the socio-energetic infrastructure involving physical anchors like ancestral halls, shrines, and grave sites suggests that the concept of sustained individual identity after death is energetically dependent upon the living. So, the concept of sustained individual identity after death is energetically dependent upon the living. So the living individual must keep the deceased person's memory alive. You see what I'm saying? You're walking around with their genetics on, with their DNA wearing their face and everything. When you look in the mirror, you're gonna see you see a plethora of people, mama, daddy, grandma, all these people when you look in the mirror. So we walking around wearing their genetics. So but it's not enough. We must keep their names alive, keep their um their contributions alive and everything like that is what it's saying. Um, okay, or that responsibility is on the living. Excuse me. The scheduled mandatory right function effectively as metaphysical maintenance contracts. Metaphysical maintenance contracts guaranteeing the required reciprocal energy flow between the established social hierarchy, the living lineage, and the spiritual hierarchy, the ancestral gods. Okay, so the ancient esoteric interpretation synthesis of Gerald Massey and Hargrave Jennings. Hargrave Jennings is a student of Pascal Beverly Randolph. And if you've been watching any of my videos, you should know who Gerald Massey is at this point. Esoteric scholarship provides a deeper symbolic framework for understanding the metaphysical basis of ancestral continuity, moving beyond mere social function, So we're going to get into the bioetheric aspects of this stuff. We're covering the social stuff. This is just the skin of the onion. You see what I'm saying? Gerald Massey, a key figure in comparative Egyptology, argued that the Egyptian funerary tradition, particularly the Book of the Dead, spells of coming forth by day, because that's that coming forth by day, because it's not the deceased person after their journey in the underworld, their ultimate destiny is to participate again in the work in the world of the living. If they were a worthy soul, what have you, and they could survive the journey through the underworld. In the end, they're supposed to participate in the world of the living again, as a deceased person or honored deceased person. Provide a sophisticated written record crucial for interpreting the earlier primitive death rites and fetish figures. He's saying that the Book of the Dead does this. It provides a sophisticated written record crucial for interpreting the earlier primitive death rites and fetish figures found globally. Massey maintained that ancient Egyptian gnosis, knowing, understood that humanity is inherently born with a soul. So yeah, that when you read the Egyptian Book of the Dead, like how we talked about, we discussed, a lot of that on a previous video and everything like that. When you read the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the human individual is broken down into various different constituent parts or whatever case may be, of which, you know, he's comprised of a soul. You see, a soul, a spirit, the physical body, all kind of different divisions or whatever. But yes, there's a soul. Massey utilized comparative mythology to illustrate the symbolic language of these ancient concepts. For example, he analyzed the crocodile figure Sobek in mythology, positing it as an early sign language representation of the soul of life emerging from the primordial waters. Okay, similar to how we talk about the ether being um, a non-compressible fluid. You see what I'm saying? And your atoms and things, even cells, being stable vortexes in the ether or whatever. Like the Lord Kelvin vortex model of the atom, like you flushing your toilet. Some like there's some primordial ocean, and then there's a whirlwind or whatever. And the nukta, like we talked about, the Hadid point, the black dot, the prana, as it were, are the center of these vortex worlds or whatever case may be, these little dots or whatever case may be. So this symbolism was then applied to the human soul as seen in the book of the Dead, when Osiris in the netherworld proclaims, I am the crocodile in the form of a man, signifying the soul's power and transformed state. The persistent use of such ancient symbols spanning millennia confirms the Egyptian fundamental belief in the soul's enduring existence and its post-mortem challenges. It's challenges after the person dies. So after you die, the person after the person's field decouples from the body or whatever, it goes on its own journey, as it were. And like I said, the book is entitled Coming Forth by Day. So the ultimate destination is for it to survive its challenges and have the ability to come back in the world of living. It's post-mortem challenges, such as struggling with the adversary of Pep in the netherworld. All right. Another note that Pep is the adversary by the time the Book of the Dead is written. So the serpent has fallen out of favor. This is post-serpent wisdom. This is more lunar phase because, as we know, the Twa write the Book of the Dead. They're at odds with the serpent at this point. So that's another thing to be noted. And this is still long before your dynastic period when we're having that conversation. Complementing this, Hargrave Jennings, known for his comparative analysis of esoteric symbolism, sought a single primordial root unifying all religious expression. Jennings specifically linked the great mysteries of death to the mysteries of generation and life. Hargrave Jennings, he studied phallicism, not phallicism as in the male reproductive organ alone, but phallicism in the sense of both reproductive organs. Basically, something akin to or similar to what we were talking about, tantra and everything like that. Viewing them as two inseparable aspects of cosmic generation. The convergence of Massey and Jennings suggests that the ancestral line is not simply a biological chain, but a continuous, self-renewing, energetic phenomenon, right? Oh, the convergence of Massey and Jennings suggests that the ancestral line is not simply a biological chain. It's not just people being born, but a continuous, self-renewing, energetic phenomenon, right? Okay, by integrating the mystery of death with the mystery of generation, these esotericists indicate that the generative energy that forms the physical body carries the intrinsic accumulated energetic field of the forebears. Let's do that again. Um, By integrating the mystery of death with the mystery of generation, these esotericists indicate that the generative energy that forms the physical body carries the intrinsic accumulated energetic field of your forebears. So which makes it make sense, because if the DNA is a etheric, some sort of antenna for the ether or whatever case may be, you carry their DNA, so it only makes sense that you carry aspects of their field or their energy. So when we say energy, previously that may have sounded like an ambiguous um, catch-all term or whatever case may be, but as we've gotten a little bit deeper into this, we see that's a real thing, especially with some of Robert Becker's stuff in his book, The Body Electric. So this time-spanning current establishes a non-physical pathway, which is critical for hypothetical operation of the bioetheric feedback loop. Okay, a non-physical pathway, huh? Eschatological roadmap of consciousness transition. The analogy of the Egyptian and Tibetan funerary texts reveal two distinct yet complementary methodologies for ensuring the transition and stabilization of consciousness post-mortem, reflecting divergent views of the nature of the enduring self. All right. Okay, so as we get into a lot of this Ether Illustrated, and as we kind of have different case studies on different things, you're gonna see a lot of things that may look similar. Let's say like we'll have another case study on polytheistic um, religious systems, and we're going to do a case study on the Ifa system, and we're going to do we're going to contrast that with the Apollo system. And when you see those two systems side by side, they have a lot of obvious similarities, but there are also key differences. You see what I'm saying? As far as the functions of the system and how they work energetically, and we're gonna kind of get into a lot of that. Yeah. So the Egyptian passage navigating the duat and achieving the Akh, right? So the ancient Egyptian eschatological system is characterized by the need to transform the deceased into a perfected being. So that's the special part of the Egyptian system. They have to transform the deceased person into a perfected being after they finish their trials and everything like that, achieved through the union of several disparate soul components, specifically the Ka essence and the Ba personality, often depicted as a human headed bird. The journey to the field of reeds, Egyptian heaven, is defined as a long and challenging voyage through the duat or underworld to successfully complete the journey and prevent the second death. The second death, you lose your memory and all that stuff like that. The deceased required highly structured external guidance provided by the Book of the Dead, or aka the spells of coming forth by day. This text, compiled by numerous priests over a millennia, provided the necessary magic spells to restore the physical ability of the living, respond correctly to divine judges, and navigate past gatekeepers wielding knives. Certain spells, such as Chapter 64, date back over 6,000 years to the first dynasty, underscoring their perceived necessity for securing triumph in the netherworld and ensuring that the soul is not kept back on the path of the duat. The ultimate trial was the weighing of the heart, right? The weighing of the heart against the feather and everything like that. Okay, where the heart contained the record of all life's actions. Remember how we said the heart emanates a field. The heart has its own field. Go back to the video we did about the science of the heart. The heart emanates its own field and everything. It has its own portion of the nervous system all to itself, and it communicates more to the brain than the brain communicates to the heart. You see what I'm saying? It's even a thing called the heart brain. It's a such thing as neurocardiology, where they deal with the heart's brain. You see what I'm saying? So it's a whole thing all unto itself. The heart was weighed against the feather of Ma'at, symbolizing truth and justice. Failure, a heart heavier than the feather, resulted in the soul being devoured by Ammit and cast into the darkness, signifying utter destruction. This judgment highlights the importance of ethical conduct, although ritual mitigation ritual mitigation, such as reciting spell 30b inscribed on a heart scarab, was prescribed to prevent the heart from bearing false witness. The entire Egyptian process is thus characterized by the need for ritual intervention and defense, suggesting an overriding concern for maintaining the structural integrity of the energetic form through external command based means spells. You see what I'm saying? Inputs into the feedback loop, right? Ensuring it means coherent and anchored within, ensuring it, the soul remains coherent and anchored within the challenging lower frequency realm of the duat. So it's going into a more chaotic lower frequency realm or whatever case may be, and it's trying to maintain its coherence. It's trying to stay together and not be broken apart in this realm, this different frequency. Um, because as we talked about previously, if we contrast the circle of space, matter, and time, that other realm or whatever would be on the circle of space, matter, and time. That's like the chaos sphere. That's where things come apart. That's where things are. Energy is broken down back to its original form or whatever case may be. On this side that we exist on, energy is discharged and things are grown into the forms that we see. So the Tibetan, and that's from a perspective of the circle of space, matter, and time. I mean, we got some other material coming where we're going to get into a little bit deeper into the Kabbalah and everything like that. But that's that type of thing. Um, The Tibetan transition, the Bardo states, and the illusion of samsara. In contrast to the Egyptian quest for stable, permanent the Tibetan tradition, guided by the Bardo Thodo, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, focuses on fluid continuity of consciousness, rebirth, not reincarnation of a fixed Atman, right? The Bardo Thodu serves as a guide for the conscious stream during the intermediate states, the Bardos, between death and the next embodiment. Okay, so it's more dealing with rebirth. Um, it's more dealing with guiding you to rebirth versus how the Egyptian system was basically guiding you to heaven, but also giving you the opportunity to participate in the world of the living. The six Bardos represent transitional phases where the consciousness encounters the projections, terrifying, wrathful deities, or seductive, peaceful ones. The experiences determine the consciousness's future trajectory. Successful navigation leads to liberation, moksha, while entanglement in these illusions lead to further entrapment in the cycle of samsara. The critical difference from the Egyptian Book of the Dead is that the guidance relies on the consciousness, recognizing the illusory nature of these projections. So in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the consciousness, it relies on the consciousness, recognizing the illusory nature of these projections, which requires advanced intentional clarity, right? Modern analogy modern analogy views this process as algorithmic karma. Navigating algorithmic karma is how they put it, and seductive illusions within a digital virtual experience. So this is the dead person after they die. They're navigating their karma. So basically, it's similar to what we talked about in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, how they had it, or whatever case may be. When you're exposed to the fullness of the ether without the body and everything, you have to deal with all of the archetypes, the subconscious archetypes that you've accumulated. Um, the Tibetan model reveals that the post-mortem field is inherently unstable, right? Highly susceptible to internal forces and projections, right? The necessary modulation for survival and liberation is provided by internal intentionality and recognition. This acts as a high frequency spiritual modulator necessary to stabilize the self organizing field of consciousness and prevent the karmic impulse from automatically leading to further entanglement. So, yeah, so, you know, both of them kind of describe the afterlife, or this phase of energy that the deceased person experiences or whatever, as being a very unstable state or whatever, that's basically trying to, like how we were talking about on the circle of space, matter, time, this place, or this um, phase of energy that they find themselves in, it's trying to pull things apart or whatever case may be. So they're trying to maintain the continuity of their structure and everything like that amidst all of this. um, by different means, whether it be the prayers, whether it be mindfulness, however it may go. So comparative eschatology, Egyptian Book of the Dead versus the Tibetan Book of the Dead on post-mortem identity. The primary goal for the Egyptian Book of the Dead is achieving Akh, the perfected spirit, union with Osiris, Re, eternal life. Okay. Tibetan Book of the Dead, by contrast, achieving liberation, nirvana, or favorable rebirth, right? Identity focus, fusion of multiple soul components like the Ba and the Ka to create a permanent entity. Okay, in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, continuity of consciousness stream, influenced by karmic seeds, rebirth, not reincarnation. Okay, post-mortem state, duat, underworld, and the field of reeds, heaven. So you have the underworld, which is this unstable thing, this unstable phase of the energy kind of pulling at the deceased person or whatever. And you have the field of reeds after they finally make it through all that psychological baggage, kind of like that we talked about. That's kind of like heaven. The six bardos, intermediate transitional states. So the various bardos and the various things that they have to face, or whatever, bardos as in the intermediate states. The method of guidance, provision of textual spells, spells of coming forth by day, and physical amulets for navigation and protection, right? So the amulets that they lay on the dead person's body and stuff like that, that they may mummify them with or whatever case may be, may serve to aid them in their journey into the afterlife, and the spells that they recognize from the Book of the Dead. Okay, recitation of text, Todo, by the Lama, living guide to prompt recognition and intentional clarity. Okay, so they read certain texts from the Tibetan Book of the Dead by lamas and stuff like that. So on previous videos, we talked about how singing, praying, and certain emotional things done by the living can affect the deceased person shortly after they pass on and they have to go through this or whatever case may be. So like I said, this is how it's described in those two cultures and everything like that, but it goes right back to what we were talking about the decoupling of the field, and then them having to experience the fullness of the ether without the body as a filter. You see what I'm saying? Now they're at odds with all the psychological baggage, the archetypes, and everything like that that they've experienced throughout their life. I likened it on the previous video to like doing ayahuasca or something like that, and you see your all this stuff, all these psychological archetypes, and all this all the neural pathways that you build up and stuff like that or whatever. All that information is kind of rushing in, and that's how the plant communicates with you, as it were. Okay, so the bioetheric model of the living body, the interaction between the living and the deceased necessitates a theoretical framework that bridges classical biology and esoteric energy dynamics. This requires synthesizing established research on bioelectricity with concepts rooted in the high frequency physics of Nikola Tesla. Like I what we've been saying, we've been dealing with Robert Becker's work, talking about how proteins in the body are basically capacitors or semiconductors. The cell functions like a capacitor or a semiconductor and stuff like that. We've been using Tesla's physics to kind of flesh it out without all of the particles and everything like that, to kind of give us a different flavor and kind of Tesla's physics is always going to be more compatible with a lot of your esoteric stuff, more so than Einstein's physics, because with Tesla's physics, his physics are based off of the metaphysics of Swami Vivekananda. So it's based off of Vedic metaphysics. So that's why it gels so well with this subject matter that we're talking about. Okay, so Robert Becker's The Body, Electric, DC Currents, and Biological Capacitance. Dr. Robert Becker, pioneer in electrophysiology, provided a clinical scientific grounding for understanding the body's electrical nature. His work demonstrates a low level of DC current are vital for life processes governing cellular regeneration, development, and healing. Becker's research challenges purely mechanistic views of the body by showing that the bioelectric field extends beyond chemical reaction, serving as a foundational driver for biological organization. Now, we've talked about Becker's work at length on previous videos. Go back to the video where I talk about the human body as a semiconductor and all that. The body's physical matrix can be hypothetically modeled as a large, complex biological capacitor, a temporary battery. This capacitor is essential for storing the endogenous electrical charge necessary for conscious regenerative life. The existence of a measurable physical biofield, the human biofield, like how we talked about. Go back to the video we talk about melanin in the human biofield. We say if the human biofield is grass, the human aura, so-called, Human biofield is the medical term for it. The human aura was grass. Melanin would be the soil that the grass grows out of. So, which holistic care providers note can shift or change patterns, support the characterization of the body as an energetic system whose vitality is dependent upon its ability to maintain and process this electrical charge. Okay, so the body is characterized in from the perspective of Robert Becker's work work he did work on the regeneration of human tissue and everything like that. According to his work, the human body functions and is like a battery, or a capacitor, battery, same similar thing. That's why we say with death, there's a decoupling of the field from the battery or the body. Okay, so Tesla's physics and the etheric link integrated Becker's endogenous DC current with the implications of Tesla's concepts, particularly the exploration of high frequency energy and the possibility of non-local energy medium, the ether. So that was the main thing that we got from Tesla. Consciousness is theorized as a high frequency electrical component designated here as the electromagnetic soul. That's the terminology for this. But we've talked about the electric soul. We got a whole playlist on that. The EMS is defined as an eternal energy composed of pure electromagnetic energy that operates as an electrical current beaming into and out of the brain, which acts as the hosted hardware and quantum antenna resonating like a crystal transceiver. The etheric medium, implicitly utilized in Tesla's theories, function as the universal source transmission pathway and eventual destination of the high frequency energy current upon physical death. So basically, okay, so what we've been talking about previously or whatever, just to kind of bring it on home or whatever, Robert Becker is dealing with a third nervous system, one that cells communicate with, cells use to communicate with. It governs regeneration, cellular division, all this type of stuff like that, or whatever case may be. It even the electrical impulses that are transferred through this nervous system, this DC analog nervous system, they even get down to the DNA level and everything like that. We've talked about on previous videos that the DNA would in this model would be a hypothetical fractal antenna for your etheric frequencies and things of that and things of that nature. We've talked about how the body is just a battery and stuff like that, how the brain is just a radio, how the field is where the intelligence, the information is stored. We talked about how the ether is another, how the ether and the unconscious mind, you see what I'm saying, the data of the human collective unconscious, a portion of the information and energy that's in the ether is the human collective unconscious. We related that to what's commonly called the Akashic records. Ether is called the Akasha, just kind of like just a recap on some of the other stuff we've been talking about. So let's go into decoupling and field transition at the moment of death. The dying process involves a systematic withdrawal of the energetic field from the physical structure, the battery. This withdrawal is clinically observed as a biofield decreasing in size and intensity, with the chakras reducing actively subsequently from the root to the crown. This signifies the body capacitor failing to maintain the high frequency charge of the electrical soul, hypothetical blueprint. Death, therefore, is the moment of energetic decoupling. The high frequency electric soul is released from the lower frequency physical capacitor. Accounts from energy workers describe this as the final departure of the spirit and soul, where the main aura is gone and the energy field moves up and outward from the crown. This release results in the electrical soul's instant transitioning to a higher vibrational frequency. Okay. We talked about in Tibetan tradition, they have Bardo yoga where they refine the signal and prepare for them to transition. So they have a clear transmission when they transition. So crucially, the withdrawal is not total or instantaneous. A very faint energy field remains near the body for a brief period, deemed almost undetectable. The residual charge acts as a temporary low vibrational anchor for recently departed consciousness. This residual charge, the lingering charge that's in the capacitor still, the dead body, this residual charge acts as a temporary, low vibrational anchor for the recently departed consciousness. So they can still, the body is still resonant with their consciousness or whatever case may be. Analogous to the final fraying of the hypothesized silver cord, what have you. They talk about the silver cord, a cord coming from similar to an umbilical cord coming from the belly of the person or whatever case may be to an astral body. That's the hypothetical terminology when they talk about the silver cord. People who are into like astral projection and all that type of stuff like that, they're familiar with the whole idea of the silver cord. It's a concept that let's say when people talk about leaving their body when they dream and stuff like that, they're connected to their physical body with a hypothetical silver cord. This short-term anchor explains the often intense, low-level psychic and emotional activity reported in the immediate aftermath of death, operating on a frequency only slightly above the physical realm. So when a person first dies or whatever, they're still connected to their body to an extent or whatever case may be. So that's a particular phase that they have according to this information. The mechanism of sustained connection, karma, resonance, and accountability. Okay, so what connects the ancestors to us? What hypothetically in this model, this hypothetical framework, this thought experiment that we're doing? Because I'm not telling nobody that this is the gospel truth. I'm not trying to get you to believe anything. I'm just trying to offer a perspective on it. That's one reason why we filter it through this electrical framework, so we have a bit more receipts and it becomes a bit more tangible for us or whatever case may be, so we can kind of get an idea. The mechanism of sustained connection, karma, resonance, and accountability. Jung's acausal connection, synchronicity as the modus operandi, right? Interaction with the deceased necessitates a non-causal mechanism, because physically we can't do anything that would tangibly interact with the deceased that we understand. As the departed entity lacks the physical means to exert traditional, mechanical force on the living world. They don't have the ability to physically act on the mechanical world because they no longer reside in their body. They don't have an avatar for the physical world. So everything that they do is going to be acausal to us. So if I don't know if that bottle of ketchup falls off the counter by itself or whatever case may be, or tips over or whatever case may be, if that was hypothetically the interaction of some deceased ancestor, hypothetically, to us on our side, it would appear as acausally because we didn't touch the ketchup bottle and make it fall, and nobody touched it. So, okay, so let's see here. Carl Jung's concept of synchronicity defined, and this is another. So when we talk about acausal connections, this is another layer of the whole acausal thing. Principles is a layer of the acausal thing, like how we was talking about principles and patterns being generated from overall principles and everything like that, and the various situations of our life or whatever. But this is another layer of the whole acausal thing. Okay, so this just expresses to us that when we start talking about acausal circumstances or whatever, it may be numerous layers of this whole acausal thing. We grasping at the principle thing right now. We kind of grasping at the idea of the ancestral realm or whatever, or ancestral intervention based on this ancient tradition or whatever the case may be. But this kind of fleshes out the acausal thing a little bit more. Okay, so defined as events that coincide meaningfully in time, yet lack a discoverable causal connection, provide the theoretical gateway for the inter-realm communication. Jung argued that just as causal connections provide understanding of the physical world, acausal connections provide meaningful understanding of the psyche and the unseen realms. So acausal connections, that would apply more to the spiritual realm. You see what I'm saying? When like how we used the example, the previous example, if the brother 607 had a chalice on the table. It was another brother that was in an interview with him or whatever. kind of pressed him a little bit, knocked over the chalice or whatever. Next thing you know, I think like a couple days later, bro blowed off his hand with fireworks or whatever case may be. A causal connection, just what we talking about. Okay, so after death, communication often manifests precisely through the synchronistic events. Experiences reported by the bereaved commonly involve the alignment of events, numbers, or symbols that hold interest, personal significance for both the living and the deceased, such as hearing a specific song, seeing familiar animal symbols, or encountering numerical sequences. After that person dies or whatever, you might the song that you and them listen to or have some fond memories of might come on the radio or something like that. You know what I'm saying? Acausal type stuff. These are not random occurrences, but rather the hypothesized mechanisms by which the deceased entity operating at a high vibrational frequency modulates the universal energy field, the ether, to create acausal patterns recognizable by the living consciousness. So basically, they're saying after people die, or whatever case may be, those little coincidences that kind of correspond with your experiences with that person, those could potentially be acausal circumstances after, grandma passed, or, what I'm saying, cousin such and such passed, or whatever case may be, that energy has been released and it is making ripples through the ether in a kind of way. Karma as a universal resonance, the energetic debt and inheritance. Okay, so this is gonna probably tie back into the DNA. Okay, the mechanism that links a specific departed electric soul to its specific living lineage is karma, right? Because remember we said if the soul is electrical, then karma is a part of the feedback loop to the original individual, to the flesh and blood individual. From the blueprint or soul to the flesh and blood individual, karma would be a part of that feedback loop. Just like how we talked about divination is a part of the feedback loop. Just like how we talked about your car breaking down is a part of the feedback loop. You see what I'm saying? You dropping your keys is a part of the feedback loop. Okay, understood not strictly as moral punishment. Not moral punishment. It's the fabric of reality healing itself. Okay, but as the universal law governing the balancing of energy, unsettled karma uh, representing vibrational tension, necessitates continued engagement in the cycle of existence. Unsettled karma. So you being Jack the Ripper in a previous existence or whatever, representing vibrational tension, necessitates continued engagement in the cycle of existence. So unresolved karma is another reason for you to keep coming here or whatever, or keep having to reincarnate or whatever, what he's saying. In the bioetheric feedback loop, model, this unresolved karma constitutes the resonant blueprint that holds the ancestor's field in the resonant proximity to the descendant. So basically what it's saying is that them having to keep coming back here, it's dealing with the feedback loop is what's keeping them coming back here. As it was said one time before, I think Dr. Malachi York pointed that out at one point. He was saying that I can't remember what book this may be one of the older books, um, but he was talking about the things that you like to do keep you coming back here. If you like to play cards or something like that, hypothetically, like to gamble or something like that or whatever, and let's say you die without having burnt out that desire or what have you. This is how it was explained to me. If you die without having burnt out that desire or whatever case may be, you'll keep coming back, or you'll come back um, without a body, desiring to gamble and all that stuff like that. And that desire to gamble will have you to reincarnate again. And so you can burn that out or whatever case may be. That's how it was kind of explained. Upon the death and decoupling of the electrical soul, the consciousness is accompanied by the causal body and the electric body. The causal body is the repository of karmic information. So um, when we say causal body, electric body, and all that, just think different phases of the energy. Just the energy in different phases. Phases mean like if you think of the zodiac wheel, and you think of Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, all that. You see what I'm saying? Each would be like a different phase of the energy or whatever. Okay, so upon the death and decoupling of the electrical soul, the consciousness is accompanied by the causal body and the electrical body. The causal body is the repository of karmic information. When we said the causal body is like the server, you see what I'm saying? And the human body in this phase is like the cell phone. Let's break our cell phone a million times. We'll keep backing it up on the server, and we'll keep backing up our cell phone. We never lose, we never miss a beat. The complete energetic instruction set based on past actions and intentions. This energetic blueprint directly influences descendants, physical reality, and field states. This energetic blueprint directly influences the descendants, physical reality, and field states. So basically, on a previous video when we were talking about sex and everything like that, the video about sexual union and all that, we were talking about the difference between a biological father and a stepfather or whatever. A child can get close to their stepfather and develop a level of resonance with their stepfather, so it's so that they can relate to him and they can get close to their stepfather. But whether you build resonance with another man or father figure or what have you, your actual father, that whose DNA you carry, your karma is gonna come from that individual. So that's how it was worded on the previous video. So based on this, um, our karma comes from our ancestors. You see what I'm saying? A portion of our karma, because it would only make sense because we're one individual, but we're always a part of a group. You're a part of some ethnic group. You're a part of some, some tribe or something like that. So we're always a part of a group, and our ancestors' karma actually travels with us and stuff like that. So that's an interesting notion. I think on the previous video we talked about that the notion of slavery, the transatlantic slave trade, Africans being enslaved in America and everything like that. In which now don't get it twisted. In my personal opinion, I understand that there were Native Americans, Native Americans who were indigenous to this land, as well as that were here when the um, slaves arrived, or whatever the case may be. A lot of your Native Americans from the American Southeast or whatever, they come out of Mexico. They migrated out of Mexico because they started eating corn at a particular time or whatever case may be after the Mayans disappeared and all that. So that's them migrating up to the American Southeast, and they were copper toned people, melanated people. But that's a whole nother story. We got a whole nother video on that. I ain't bogging this one down with it. But in the slave trade, the transatlantic slave trade, when those when the African slaves came over and everything like that, or whatever case may be, um, um, basically we had the discussion about how that was potentially an a causal situation that involved karma from a previous incarnation, because we talked about how the Moors enslaved Europeans. We talked about how there was in Greek times, Greco-Roman times, and prior, there was a enduring slave trade in the Caucasus Mountains and Black Sea region for from ancient times to modern times. You see what I'm saying? So there was a period of time where you had black people with white slaves. So potentially the transatlantic slave trade, potentially that may have been um, a karmic situation or what have you, because according to this, we carry the karma of our ancestors. You see what I'm saying? So just keep moving right along. I'm just reading what it say. Upon the death and decoupling. Okay, here we go. Okay, the bioetheric feedback loop and reflection principle, the transmission of this karmic blueprint across generations occurs through the bioetheric feedback loop, manifesting as the ancestral shadow, a pervasive, inherited distortion of the energetic field, sometimes termed miasm. This distortion stems from suppressed diseases, unexpressed emotions, or unresolved psychological trauma, e.g., despair, scarcity mindset, creative insecurity, carried by the lineage, carried by the lineage, carried by the lineage. So that's an interesting notion. You see what I'm saying? That not only do we transfer our genetics, but we transfer our karma. our actions within the feedback loop. You see what I'm saying? The reciprocity that we got coming from the feedback loop is visited upon our progeny. You see what I'm saying? Okay, so evidence of the transgenerational epigenetic trauma, such as increased vulnerability to PTSD in descendants of trauma survivors. Okay, so hold on. Evidence of transgenerational epigenetic trauma, such as increased vulnerability to PTSD in descendants of trauma survivors, suggests a quantifiable link in this inherited energetic signature. So they're saying that they have people who were children or relatives of people who were trauma survivors, descendants of people who are trauma survivors or whatever, are prone more so to PTSD or what have you. So that's an interesting thing. The reflection principle dictates the energetic quality and spiritual welfare of the ancestor are reflected in the life conditions of the descendants. Let's read that again. The reflection principle dictates that the energetic quality and spiritual welfare of the ancestors are reflected in the life conditions of the descendants. So basically, whatever they did or didn't do, you see what I'm saying? Their thoughts, feelings, and emotions were a product of that. The karma that they had, that they generated, we're a part of that, and also that's something to be mindful of as far as in our current position, the karma and things that we're generating. You see what I'm saying? um, is it will be visited on those that come after us. So that's an interesting thing. Okay, let's see. The lineage is effectively modeled as an ancestral group soul. The lineage, just like how what we talked about, just like how we talked about Egypt, the society, because you have individuals make families, families make tribes. You see what I'm saying? Tribes make nations. You see what I'm saying? So yeah, there's a collective all the way up into the nation. You see what I'm saying? So that's an interesting thing. Like how we always talk about. You see what I'm saying? We exist as a part of a community. You see what I'm saying? No matter how individualistic. I know technology has a lot of us on this individualistic tip because there's a level of convenience. Like I can sit here, I ain't gotta go see nobody. I can sit here and record a video by myself or whatever case may be. Had this been back, let's say like in the 70s or something, if I want to record an audio, I may have to go in somebody's studio or something of that nature. Um, Technology creates certain conveniences that allows us independence, right? But independence is a temporary thing that comes from a level of convenience. So when society goes back into a situation where there are harsher things that's going on or whatever, independence will not be an option. So you see what I'm saying? That's just a thing. We always belong to some form of collective. Um, so basically the lineage is effectively modeled as an ancestral group soul, right? A single time spanning entity defined by the shared energetic current. So you and all of your family are one entity, as it were. You see what I'm saying? The lineage. The descendants work to clear these inherited miasms and negative patterns simultaneously, acts to heal and elevate the ancestors' energetic field. So when we try to, that's interesting. So when we work out the differences between ourselves or whatever, or the differences that we have within um, our family members and everything like that. We create cohesiveness within our family unit or what have you. It actually heals the blueprint, or that's a good thing, or that's a positive feedback for the overall blueprint of the collective. That's interesting, kind of like how we talked about before. What the individual does affect the collective, and as we can see, living and the overarching group blueprint, as we'll call it. Thereby, the task of resolving karmic debt is a collective intergenerational responsibility mandated by the persistence of this shared field. So that's interesting, and that's another reason to kind of keep the ways of the ancestors and stuff like that, because I don't know if it worked and it produced a certain quality of individual and stuff like that. You see what I'm saying? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And they kind of gotta give account, if it were. You see what I'm saying? That affects them. You see what I'm saying? Us deviating from the script, as it were. So, theoretical model of consciousness. component, analog in physical science. Okay, so the living body, electrochemical matrix, biological capacitor. Okay, role in post-mortem interaction. Stores the electromagnetic charge of consciousness, anchors the spirit to the physical frequency. All right, this is what the living body does. Okay, consciousness, soul, electromagnetic soul, life force energy, eternal energy released upon decoupling, transitions to higher frequency. Okay, consciousness, soul, karmic records, stored energetic information, ancestral miasm, um, the blueprint of resonance, facilitates the acausal connection, Jungian synchronicity with the living lineage. So remember when we were getting into some of Eileen Day McCusick stuff, we were talking about how the field stores things, just like how the unconscious, the human collective unconscious is a portion of the energy and information stored within the ether at large, aka the Akashic records and everything like that. So the field, period, as we discovered when we were talking about Eileen Day McCusick stuff and her work with the human biofield and everything like that, the field stores our life information or whatever the case may be. You see what I'm saying? So no coincidence that if it's talking about that the family is a collective entity, so to speak, energetically or whatever, its field must store some sort of energy or whatever, or some sort of memory. So that is a interesting thing. Okay, so conditions for prolonging and severing the connection. Okay, so we've established that we have a connection with the ancestors and stuff like that. We share karma. Our DNA connects us to the same etheric blueprint that their DNA connected them to. So we're kind of like peas in a pod as far as the ancestors. So just because you die don't mean you're gonna get out of this family. So I'm being facetious, but um uh, the conditions for, and it's interesting. Another brother, I was having a conversation with another brother who's uh, he's a spiritualist and stuff like that, and we were having a conversation. The brother Aha, if he's watching this, but we were having a conversation, and the brother we were speaking. Um, about my grandmother and stuff like that. And it was just an interesting conversation. He was saying, okay, well, he was like, I was getting, saying something from, the deceased person, just letting you know, like, even though I'm deceased, I'm still your grandmother. I'm like, whoa, I know, and things like that make it kind of click. So, what I'm saying? I put that on tape because maybe somebody need to hear it. Maybe somebody need to understand that that epiphany that he hit me with. So, at that time. Okay, so the duration and quality of the post-mortem connection are subject to specific energetic transactions performed by the living descendant. The duration and quality of post-mortem connection, how connected that we stay to our ancestors, are subject to specific energetic transactions performed by the living descendant. So it's still a feedback loop from us to them. These actions either reinforce the bioetheric feedback loop, like what I just said, or thorough neglect contribute to its severance. Put some flowers on grandma grave, man. You know what I'm saying? Let's see here. Actions by the living to sustain the connections. Uh, the most immediate and universally recognized actions for prolonging the connection and ritual and material support. These formalized rites, such as traditional mourning periods, elaborate funerals, and the persistent tending of graves and shrines, act as deliberate, focused energy transactions directly toward the deceased. Offering food and drink is one of the most widespread practices intended to provide for the ancestors in their new state, right? So in the Egyptian concept or whatever, they got the tomb filled up with gold and stuff like that. You see what I'm saying? They took it to another level and stuff like that. They still had food offerings that they might take to the graves and stuff like that. And honestly, that's actually, anybody, I know a lot of y'all probably been to the Valley of the Kings and seen it. That's super dope. Going underground into those tombs and stuff like that, and you see the whole story of this person's life written on the walls and everything like that. So I mean, that's very very dope. Offering food and drink, one of the most widespread practices intended to provide the ancestors in their new state and ensure their continued positive disposition toward the family. These actions are not merely symbolic; they are understood to provide necessary energetic support or ancestral merit ancestral merit anchoring the departed field. Okay, so the stuff we do for the ancestors on this side anchors them here, or whatever case may be. And anchoring them here, they're your ancestors, they're your people, so they have an interest in, they're trying to probably do what's in your best interest, or whatever case may be. And they have some sort of, according to this, and according to, ancient sources or what have you, they have an a causal effect on the world of the living. You see what I'm saying? So that's another, that's what we're gathering from this on a like they say on the Twilight Zone. This is just submitted for your approval. I'm not trying to convert you to away from nothing, but we just sit this right here for a bit of contrast. We know that there are people all over the world currently that do ancestral, rituals and things like that. And in the ancient world, this was a major thing as well. So we just exploring something and exploring the mindset. What if these people weren't crazy? What if there was actually a science behind what they were doing when they were venerating their ancestors? So let's continue. On a deeper metaphysical level, the most potent action for sustaining the connection involves improving the descendants' own energetic state. What? On a deeper metaphysical level, the most potent action for sustaining the connection involves improving the descendants' own energetic state. So by us being dysfunctional, we're hurting the blueprint, the ancestors' blueprint. Straight up. That's basically what it's saying or whatever. By us being functional and doing things that we need to do, that's enriching that the blueprint and the ancestral energetic state. Okay, so by actively engaging in practices that raise personal vibration, we got a whole video about voltage multiplication, such as intentional acts of love, forgiveness, joy, and meditative clarity. The living generate high quality energy. The positive energetic output directly assists the deceased ancestors' spiritual progression. So by us doing positive progressive things as the true and living, you see what I'm saying? The ancestors get a piece of that according to this, because we're genetically connected. There's a feedback loop between us and them. We're one. You see what I'm saying? So not only do we wear their faces, you see what I'm saying, and their genetics, you see what I'm saying? We're connected. We're one. You see what I'm saying? Uh, and I know that sounds like some Marvel Comics, we are Venom type thing, but y'all just humor me on this, which may have been frozen in time by unresolved trauma. Okay, so let's get back. Providing empowerment and aiding in restoration of the ancestors' emotional charge, which may have been frozen in time by unresolved karma. This demonstrates that the well-being of the dead is reciprocally linked to the vibrant spiritual health of the living. Amen. Stabilizing the ancestral field and preventing its dissolution. So we can't get along amongst each other in our current physical living iteration. That hurts the patriarchs of our family that laid it down for us. You see what I'm saying? And according to this. Okay, so when the bioetheric feedback loop is neglected, when you don't go, when you don't have grandma pictures in your house, and you don't, you know what I'm saying, you don't, reflect on them good times you had with, granddaddy and all that, you know what I'm saying, you don't put flowers on the grave, or remember them, you know what I'm saying. When the bioetheric feedback loop is neglected, the energetic link is effectively damaged or severed. In traditional Asian culture, where the bloodline is considered the root of the individual, like the deep root of a tall tree, forgetting or parting ways with the ancestral culture leads to the weakening of its root. The ancestral field, though not immediately damaged, begins to show signs of energetic depletion, manifesting as withering branches. And also, I'm assuming that they can't help you as readily if you neglect your connection with them. I would assume that their connection with you would also be uh, wavering, and they wouldn't be able to assist. Um, for the living descendant, this severance manifests as pitro dosha, energetic debt, which is understood not as a curse but as an energetic imbalance resulting from the descendant's failure to fulfill their dharma reciprocal duty. This imbalance creates substantial obstacles in life, including persistent financial instability, inherited money patterns, inherited health issues, right? Because how we said, that's interesting, because how we said, according to Dolores Cannon, when you have physical illnesses, that's a communication, that's a message from um, the blueprint telling you something, but you're not dealing with it psychologically, so it has to manifest throughout your body. So potentially hereditary diseases that may run in the family may be a manifestation of some sort of karma or whatever case may be on a larger scale. Um, some sort of collective karma that the family has may manifest through some sort of hereditary disease. That is interesting. Law of family harmony and the recurring negative mental patterns. For the ancestor, the loss of this critical energetic anchor leaves the post-mortem field vulnerable. What? Since the subtle realms, duet, bardos, lower spiritual realms are described as challenging and unstable, and absent of the lineage's focused energy on absence of the lineages focused energy destabilizes the departed conscious. So okay, so when this individual decouples from the field or whatever the case may be, that person's going to have a hard enough time navigating this different phase of the energy where they're at odds with all their karma and psychological baggage and all this stuff like that or whatever. And you being jacked up and me being jacked up, that's gonna create a harder time because they don't have the strength of our energy to kind of like help them because we feeding off of the same stuff, the same blueprint. So our feedback on our side is not feeding the blueprint enough to help them. So they depend on us like we depend on them. That's basically what it's saying. Like in the bioetheric feedback loop anchoring the required energy input, the ancestors' field faces the threat of dispersal or becoming trapped in low vibrational states, perpetually entangled in unresolved emotional patterns without the necessary energetic uplift to achieve higher progression. Okay, frequency dynamics and the inter-realm boundary. Okay, so I think this is addressing the differential in the living realm versus the realm of the ancestors or the deceased, the vibrational differential and realm structure. Let me show we still rolling. All right, we still rolling. Okay, the core mechanism for defining the separation and interaction of the realms is vibrational frequency. The decoupling of the electromagnetic soul at death results in an instant transition to a higher vibrational frequency. Consciousness, like all energy, vibrates at different levels, and the subtle realms of existence are organized according to their these differentials, different planes, different phases of the energy. Esoteric frameworks delineate multiple distinct spiritual realms, often grouped into 6 realms operating on higher frequencies and 4 on lower frequencies than the physical realm. The higher realms are described as absolute, scintillating with life, reflecting their higher energetic density and purity, while lower realms are characterized by less light and denser vibration. So that's just kind of like a super ultra condensed version of spiritual realms. The reason I choose not to really go into that too in depth is because of the fact that different traditions have different perspectives on what they view the spiritual realms after death is. We didn't really want to get into all of that. I just wanted to get into the process, the connection that we have to the ancestors and why it's even relevant to remember the ancestors. So let's keep going. Um, the frequency differential for limited contact. The frequency differential between the realm of the living, low physical vibration, and the realm of the deceased, higher vibration, is the critical factor limiting continuous contact. They're on a higher vibration without the buffer of the body. We're on a lower frequency. Remember, that's the purpose of tantra and spiritual practice, to raise the frequency or whatever. So naturally, a normal person in the flesh has a low voltage or whatever case may be. So at our low voltage state, we really can't really. It's harder for us to interact with them. You see what I'm saying? You almost have to have some sort of training to interact with them or whatever case may be because the signal is that faint. Spiritual models emphasize that beings in the spiritual realm generally will not lower their vibration to the dense physical plane. Therefore, successful interaction requires a living person to actively and intentionally bridge this gap. You damn near have to have special training to do so. The or some sort of gift. The living must raise their own personal vibration. We got a whole video about human voltage multiplication to achieve the necessary receptive state, tuning their consciousness, the biological antenna. The body is a battery, is an antenna as well, to the afterlife frequency. This modulation is achieved through focused mental discipline, such as meditation, as well as the cultivation of high quality emotions like appreciation, forgiveness, love, and joy. Remember how we talking about all of these things are also principles, right? Okay, this process is analogous to the tuner, a receiver to a specific electromagnetic band, moving from AM to FM frequency vibrations. The frequency band occupied by the deceased is directly modulated by the accrued karmic resonance. The frequency band occupied by the deceased is modulated by their accrued karmic resonance, right? Entities, so where they go, basically, it's similar to what Judeo-Christians kind of deal with. If you're good, you go to heaven. If you're bad, you go to hell. So basically, that's a super ultra simplified version of what we just talked about right there. The frequency band occupied by the deceased is directly modulated by their accrued karmic resonance. Entities burdened by heavy, unresolved karma possess a denser, lower frequency signature, which may hold them closer to the physical realm. You love to gamble. You see what I'm saying? But I ain't got nobody to roll them dice. I need arms to roll them dice. So when you get born again as a you go through that second death and be born again so you can gamble again. Paradoxically facilitating easier but often disruptive energetic interactions through the bioethic feedback loop. Conversely, higher evolved or liberated ancestors reside in the highest, lightest frequency bands, required superior intentionality and vibrational clarity from the living to establish meaningful synchronistic contact. So the higher um, frequency, the ancestor or what have you, the more intentional and the more clear the signal from us on this physical side in order to interact with them. Now, I'm about to hit the conclusion real quick. So before we even conclude, I know we're talking about the whole ancestral thing. Now I know a lot of people, you know, we have cultural heroes or whatever case may be. Let's say like Malcolm X or Marcus Garvey or somebody like that. I'm personally not related to Malcolm X or Marcus Garvey, but you know, we, me personally, we claim them as a part of this lineage that allows me to even speak on stuff like this without the contributions of those individuals, and the people that they influence and the chain of events that they cause or whatever. I could not be here speaking to you right now. So we still claim them as cultural heroes as a part of our, our cultural framework or what have you. Um, however, at the same time, you have, let's say, like when we talk about the Twa and we talk about Osiris or whatever case may be, a lot of us that study ancient Kemet, we may consider Osiris or, you see what I'm saying, some of the Anu people as our distant ancestors or whatever case may be. I say all that to say, just as we have these lofty, saying everybody want to commune with angels and stuff like that, but you can't commune with angels as it was explained to me. You can't commune with the angels and all the fly stuff until you holler at grandmama and them, mama and them, and get all that other stuff straight. Because you can't know from a Judeo-Christian perspective, it's ridiculous to know Jesus's whole lineage all the way back to Adam, but you don't know your lineage. You see what I'm saying? That's kind of backwards. So you see what I'm saying? And as you can see how important these people are. You see what I'm saying? It's for energetically according to this framework. You see what I'm saying? Not trying to change nobody's belief again, but it's like the Twilight Zone submitted for your approval, either illustrated. You know what I'm saying? So conclusion and synthesis, right? And future theoretical vectors. The analysis of global ancestral traditions informed by esoteric interpretation and speculative biophysics yields a cohesive theoretical model of post-mortem interaction. The necessity for the living to maintain the link emphasized in traditions from the Egyptian concern for the Tibetan focus on intentional clarity in the bardo reflects a deep recognition of the fragility of the post-mortem consciousness stream and its energetic dependence on its lineage. So basically, when a person dies, um, they're in a fragile state or whatever case may be. The journey that they're about to embark upon as far as the afterlife and stuff like that, they got to come to grips with all of these archetypes and all of that subconscious information and stuff like that. And they actually need the well wishes, need the love and support of their lineage or whatever case may be. So even with that being said, sincere mourning, funerals, things like that are actually necessary or whatever. And it is kind of like a homegoing ceremony, for anybody who's lost somebody recently. The bioetheric feedback loop synthesizes this ancient imperative with modern energetic understanding. Robert Becker's established bioelectricity defines the body as an electrochemical capacitor battery, while Tesla's physics provide the framework for high frequency electromagnetic soul released upon decoupling. The post-mortem interaction is governed by Carl Jung's principle of acausal connection, synchronicity, mediated by the karmic resonance, the energetic blueprint of the inherited intentions and traumas that bind the ancestors' field to the descendant. So the karma of the ancestor binds them to their descendants and everything like that. So we're carrying out the karma of previous generations and everything like that. The persistence and positive influence of the ancestral field are intrinsically dependent on the descendants' maintenance of the bioetheric feedback loop. Go put some flowers on these people's grave, man. Go light a candle on their birthday, something. Just show a little bit of reverence and everything like that. You know what I mean? Try to make that connection. You know what I mean? By engaging in spiritual and ritual actions, the living actively modulates the frequency and differential, clearing inherited karmic debt, which simultaneously stabilizes and elevates the ancestors' frequency in higher realms. Right? This confirms that the relationship is one of profound, reciprocal energetic responsibility, governed not by physical constraints but by shared vibrational patterns. Future theoretical vectors of this domain should focus on rigorously modeling the energetic properties of the causal body as a complex non-physical data storage system, the server. When we talking about the spiritual server that the soul is on, basically. That's a metaphor we've been running with, potentially integrating principles from quantum information theory. Furthermore, experiential research could be directed toward incorporating advanced biofeedback methodologies to measure the impact of the focused intentional states meditation on the body's DC field. Becker's initial finding to objectively quantify the predicted frequency modulation necessary for cross interrealm boundaries, thereby transforming these theoretical constructs into empirical hypotheses. So basically what it's saying is that that's one of the reasons why we even kind of filter it through this type of framework, because it makes it more tangible. It brings it a little bit on the side of actual tangibility and things that we can actually calculate, and it's less in the realm of subjectivity or whatever. So I just want to kind of touch on that. We dedicate that one to the all our loved ones that have kind of passed away, all our ancestors, loved ones, brothers, sisters, family members that have passed away, friends, you know what I'm saying? However, that have kind of passed away, and we just want to kind of speak to the relevance of kind of like keeping them in our memory and everything like that. So if you like what you've been hearing, man, like and subscribe. This is another issue of that Ether Illustrated. We're gonna keep them pumping out. There's no sign of this stopping or slowing down. So y'all just bear with me, man. Peace and blessings. Peace to the true and living. Peace to the ancestors, man. Peace.